Hey everybody, I am down at school here and I'm going to record a video on refrigeration gauge sets, the similarities and differences between a couple different sets and why you might want to choose one over the other when you're out in the field. So let's go ahead and get started. This set right here is nice looking set, obviously, so you don't always want to depend on that. This one is a 4 hose manifold set, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4. Oops, I have 1, 2, 3, and then 4, which I don't have hooked up. Have 4 hand valves. This hand valve controls the flow through this hose, this one through this hose, and so on, right? So there's your 4. This is an installation set. It's got this oversized hose right here, and so this aids in the speed or the time it takes to evacuate a unit. So that's kind of what you have here. Up here, let's kind of zero in up here. This is the low side gauge, so I'll kind of explain this. These gauges are pretty much all the same. After, when you see one, you kind of see them all. But let's go ahead and look at this one. This is the low side gauge. This outer ring is pressure. So you have 50, 100, 150, and so on. That's the pressure. These color rings are temperature rings, and these are all temperatures of different refrigerants. So for instance, the rose color is the saturation temperature of 410A. The green ring is saturation temperature for R22. We have a 404A ring and a 134A ring. So for instance, if I connect this gauge to a machine and I read 150 PSI, and the refrigerant is 410A, the saturation temperature you can see would be 52. If it were 150 PSI and there was actually R22 in this one, it would be just right around 80 degrees saturation. And so on. So this is your temperature pressure relationship. You don't need to have a separate card there. So anyhow, this one is a refrigeration, again, a refrigeration gauge set that's probably meant for installation. It's kind of, it's a little more beefy and bulky and heavy. You wouldn't want to drag that out of your truck, 6, 8, 10 times a day. You'd probably want something a little lighter and a little easier to use. But anyhow, that's that one. We have one over here. Again, it's very similar. You can see this one has 3 hoses. 1, 2, 3, and we got 2 hand valves. So this hand valve controls the flow through this hose, this hand valve through the flow of this hose. You can see this is labeled 410A, so this is a dedicated set of gauges. It's not that you can't use it for other refrigerants, but it only has one temperature ring on the face of the gauge. So if we were to look at this gauge right here, you can see that we have our pressure, just like the other gauge, and then we have 410A Fahrenheit temperature right here, and that's it. We got Celsius temperature, which we don't use here, but there's your Fahrenheit temperature. So pretty straightforward, okay? And so this might be something you would use if you were running service, something similar to this. Whenever you connect these gauges, these hand valves should always remain closed. Let's see if these are closed. Yeah, it looks like they're closed. Hand valves should always be closed. You do not need the hand valves open when you are trying to read pressure. When you connect this hose to the low side of the system, you will read pressure on here, and these should be closed, okay? So always remember that. These should never be open. I like to tell students, when should these be open? Never, right? Never. Only when you're putting something in or taking something out should you open these hand valves up. Right, so 3 hose set here. There's the gauges. They're very similar. Once you understand one set of gauges and how to read it, they're the same, with all types of gauges. And then I want to show you another set here. So I'll kind of give you a picture here. This is what I would call a, these are wireless. These are great. These are newer on the market. There's different varieties, different kinds. This happens to be a field piece set. I know Testo has a new set out. There's, several different manufacturers that make them, but these are great. These are good for service. And let me just tell you a couple things about them and what they are. So here are your 2 gauges, so to speak. These are pressure transducers. And basically you will turn this on and connect that. You can see that, hopefully you can see I got a little blue window right there. So this would be for the low side. This one right here, I would turn on, and if you can see that, you got a little red window right there. And so this would be for the high side. So those are your pressure transducers. You connect all this stuff and it sends it to an app on your phone. So I would read my high and low side pressure from this. These are my temperature clamps. Again, so I'm gonna turn this one on and I get a little beep. And then this one is gonna be either for my high or low side. You can see the little red window right there. Hopefully you can see that. So this would go on my high pressure side. You can see that these, if they're not making good contact, I get that flashing light. And if these metal tips are making contact with your pipe, you get that green slow flash. That tells you got a good connection. So again, that's high side, and you do the same thing with the low side. So now I have high side and low side pressure, high side and low side line temperature, right? And then same thing for these. These are psychometric, these are psychrometers. These are probes. So one would go in the supply side and one would go in the return side. So I'm getting the return dry bulb, wet bulb, and once I have those, for you that have taken the 111 class know that you can, if you have 2 bits of information on an air sample, you can figure or calculate a lot of the other samples. So that's what this does. So when you connect all these and then you open up your app on your phone, your app will tell you a ton of information, right? It'll tell you obviously your high side, low side pressures, your high side, low side line temperatures. It'll tell you your return air and your supply air. It will calculate your superheat, your subcooling. It will tell you how much air is flowing across and over that coil. And then there's more information as well. So these are great for troubleshooting, for technicians that are, and you can see that it's pretty light. I've got these that I don't carry this any longer. I put these in my tool bag that I run the service calls with, and I just go out and I hook these up. So very, very good on the information that you get. You get a ton of information that you're not going to get with these other types of gauges. These are manual. Now, I'm a big believer in learning how to use these first, and then you can appreciate and get the information that the information you're getting from here. You can appreciate that. I think these will make a good technician better, right? I think these types of instruments make a good technician better. They're not going to make a bad technician better, right? If you don't know what you're doing, you don't know what you're doing. I don't care, what you're using. Probably one of the little downfalls, if you want to look at it like that, is obviously if you connect this to your high side and your low side, how do you add refrigerant to a machine if you need to add refrigerant, right? I mean, there's no way to add refrigerant to that. And I don't have the little fitting in here, I guess. Oh yeah, I do. So you may have to, add something like this. You may have to put this in the end there, right? And then you can connect this to the machine, and then you could add a charging hose to that if you needed. I don't use this particular thing. I really don't like these. These leak all the time in my mind. You really got to raunch down on them hard to get that flare to seal. But those are out there. You can buy a much better device that's intended for this. So there's ways around this, but I'm just saying, obviously they sell you these gauges, but if you don't know what you're doing, you'll go out and hook these up, and now you'll say, man, how do I add refrigerant to this system? Anyhow, so 3 different sets. This is the wireless set. This happens to be the field piece, but again, you can get different ones. Here is the 3-hose manifold, very, very popular. Tons of these out there. I have 1 or 2 of these on my truck as backups. And then you have this little bit heftier one. And, also, I didn't bring them out. Again, there's just tons of different types of gauges. Field piece also has a digital set that looks more like this, right? It's a big, bulky set. And again, in my mind, it's probably something you would use for installation. I just can't see dragging that thing out every time you're trying to run a service call. Obviously the price point, this would be the less expensive one. If you get a 4-hose manifold set, it's going to be a little more expensive. And then if you get a wireless digital kind of set, it's probably going to be the most expensive. Anyhow, so there you go. And just take these things in consideration when you're deciding which set of gauges to get.